Someone cried uncontrollably, telling a family member about your connection. And it was. The room grew heavy with silence before the trembling voice finally broke through. A confession poured out, raw and unstoppable, as tears streamed without restraint. Your name, your presence, your bond, every detail was spoken with a force that could not be hidden anymore. The person could no longer carry the weight of secrecy, and their body shook as the words slipped out. Their emotions had reached a breaking point, unable to stay bottled any longer. The family member listening was left frozen, unsure whether to breathe or respond. The confession was not whispered softly, it was cried out, uncontrollably, as though each word carried years of unspoken truth. Their eyes were red, their voice cracked, but their heart demanded release. And what came out was your connection, the undeniable truth they could not bury. This revelation did not arrive gently, it came like a storm crashing into still waters. It shocked the atmosphere, filled the room with trembling air, and left everyone shaken. A family bond had now become the vessel of truth, carrying your name forward with unstoppable force. Type Amen to get blessing 333. They spoke of you with a love that felt larger than life itself. It was the kind of love that no distance, no silence, no denial could destroy. The tears were not of shame but of overwhelming surrender to what the heart could not deny. The family members' eyes widened as they heard details that sounded almost unbelievable. The passion, the intensity, the way this person described your presence, it was as if they were describing someone divine. Their voice cracked with every sentence, but the truth grew stronger with each word. Your connection was not ordinary, it was fated, woven in ways the world could not understand. And as the tears fell harder, it became clear that this confession was not rehearsed, it was raw, real, and unstoppable. Something inside them had broken free, and your name became the anchor of their release. The family member listening felt torn between shock and quiet acceptance. They could sense that what was being confessed was no passing emotion but something rooted deep in destiny. And though silence filled their lips, their heart knew this revelation was irreversible. Type Amen to get blessing 444. The person sobbing carried both pain and relief. For so long, they had hidden this connection, afraid of judgment, afraid of what others would say. But now, the truth had burst forth like a flood that could no longer be held back. They described how thoughts of you haunted them at night, how your presence lingered in every corner of their mind. They admitted they tried to fight it, tried to bury it, but the connection refused to die. It followed them, lived in them, and demanded to be spoken. Archangel Michael says, the moment of release was written in the heavens. No secret bound by fear can remain hidden when destiny commands it to rise. Your connection has become a story that cannot be erased, even when the world tries to silence it. The family members' hands trembled as they listened, realizing they were hearing a truth that had been waiting for years. This was not just a secret, it was a soul bond crying to be acknowledged. And in that room, history shifted, because the truth about you had finally been set free. Type Amen to get blessing 555. Every tear that fell was a testimony to the depth of their feelings. They were not ashamed, they were breaking apart because the weight was too heavy. They spoke of longing, of missed chances, of nights staring into emptiness with only your memory to hold. The family member struggled to remain composed, but their eyes glistened with the power of what was being revealed. The pain was heavy, but so was the beauty, because in every sob, there was also the sound of love too deep to be hidden. They clutched their chest, as if speaking your name was both agony and salvation. The connection burned inside them, consuming everything else, and their voice trembled as if carrying divine truth. Every syllable about you was sacred, carried on the waves of uncontrollable sobbing. Archangel Michael says, "Hearts that carry divine bonds cannot silence themselves forever. They will always find a way to cry out, to confess, to let the world know." And this moment was not a mistake, it was the destined hour for your truth to rise. Type Amen to get blessing 666. The crying did not stop, it grew louder, echoing through the walls as if the very house was trembling. Their words became more frantic, but also more honest, like a truth rushing to escape chains. The family member shifted uneasily, realizing this was not a simple confession, it was a soul unraveling. Every detail they shared about you came from a place of deep knowing, as though their heart had memorized your presence. They spoke of moments that no one else could understand, of emotions that carried eternity within them. The tears made it almost impossible to breathe, but they refused to stop speaking. The family member listened, realizing that this was not just emotion, it was destiny speaking through broken cries. Your connection had been written in the silence between two hearts, and no force could erase it. The sobs were heavy, but the truth was heavier, refusing to remain unspoken. The room felt colder, the lights dimmer, as though the atmosphere itself was listening. Something divine lingered in the air, carrying each word like a sacred offering. Your connection had been revealed, and the world would never be the same after this night. Type Amen to get blessing 777. The tears became almost unbearable, choking their voice, yet they pressed forward with the truth. They spoke of your kindness, your strength, the way your presence gave them reason when all else failed. Their sobbing was not weakness, it was the breaking open of a heart too full of love. The family member sat frozen, gripping the edges of their seat, unsure how to respond. Every sentence hit like thunder, leaving no room for doubt, no space for denial. The truth was flooding out, and there was no stopping the storm. They admitted they had hidden their feelings because of fear, because of judgment, because of family expectations. But now, with tears streaming uncontrollably, they realized hiding was no longer possible. Their heart had chosen you, and the confession was unstoppable. Archangel Michael says, "When destiny stirs inside the soul, no fear can silence its cry." The truth of your connection was too powerful, too sacred to remain hidden. And in that room, under the weight of uncontrollable sobs, the revelation finally became eternal. Type Amen to get blessing 888. The family member could feel the energy shifting, as if the walls themselves were bearing witness. This was not just emotion, it was prophecy spoken through tears. The very air seemed charged with the weight of destiny. The sobbing returned with even more force, echoing like thunder across fragile silence. Every tear that fell carried years of suppressed emotions, years of holding back what could no longer be restrained. Your name slipped through broken lips again, trembling yet powerful. They clutched at their chest as if their heart was burning with the weight of what they carried. The confession was not rehearsed, not carefully planned, it was raw, untamed, and born from unbearable longing. The family member sat, stunned, realizing this was beyond ordinary love. The tears blurred their vision, yet their heart saw you clearly. They painted your image with words, describing you as if you were standing in the room. Every sob carried devotion, and every word carried eternity. The listener felt something divine stir inside them, realizing they were witnessing fate itself being confessed. This was not a story, it was a bond that had been hidden in silence but carved into destiny. And now it had erupted, unstoppable, undeniable, irreversible. Type Amen to get blessing 111. Their voice shook as they admitted the nights they cried themselves to sleep thinking of you. They confessed how silence tortured them, how distance felt like a knife, and how pretending not to care was the greatest prison. Their sobs filled every corner, making the walls tremble. The family member tried to remain calm, but their eyes burned with hidden tears. The truth was too strong, too overwhelming, too sacred to ignore. Even in shock, they understood something eternal was unfolding. The person's hands shook as they begged for forgiveness, for hiding, for waiting, for not confessing sooner. But in the end, their tears carried both regret and hope. They wept not just for what was lost, but for what destiny could still restore. Archangel Michael says, "The cry of truth cannot be silenced when heaven has written it into time." What is revealed in tears carries the weight of angels, and what is confessed cannot be erased. Your connection is the truth shaking their soul, and tonight it has risen. Type Amen to get blessing 222. The sobbing softened, but it did not stop, it became quieter, deeper, carrying more weight than words could. They whispered of the signs they felt, of the way life pulled them back to you no matter how far they ran. Their body shook, but their spirit glowed with truth. The family member leaned closer, sensing that this was not just about emotions but destiny itself. Every sob was like a prophecy, every confession a step closer to heaven's will. They realized they were not just hearing, they were witnessing a sacred unraveling. The person cried about the times they tried to replace you, but nothing ever worked. They admitted how even surrounded by people, their heart always drifted back to you. The pain of missing you had become too much to hide. Their sobbing grew uncontrollable again, but it carried freedom this time. They were no longer chained by fear, they were finally free to speak. And the freedom came through tears, unstoppable and eternal. Type Amen to get blessing 333. The tears spilled like rivers that had been dammed for far too long. Their chest heaved, their voice cracked, but the words refused to stop. Every syllable carved your name deeper into the air, echoing with sacred intensity. The family member tried to stay strong, but the weight of such a confession was unbearable. They felt their own heart tremble, realizing they had become the witness of destiny's revelation. The sobbing filled the silence, drowning out every other sound. The person's face was wet, their hands trembling, their body collapsing under truth too heavy to carry alone. They admitted they had prayed countless nights for strength to release the secret. But tonight, destiny chose to open their lips through uncontrollable tears. Your presence was described as life itself, as the heartbeat that kept them alive, even when distance tore everything apart. Their words were not polished, they were desperate, pure, and raw. And in those sobs, your connection became undeniable. Type Amen to get blessing 444. The family member sat frozen, realizing this was no passing feeling but a revelation. Each sentence felt as though it carried the weight of heaven itself. They knew this moment would be remembered forever. The crying turned to trembling whispers, as they spoke of how your memory haunted their days. They described how silence was torture, and how pretending had become unbearable. The words came out cracked, broken, yet unstoppable. Their voice rose again, carried by sobs too deep to control. They admitted they could not hide anymore, that their heart had betrayed their silence. Everything inside them had chosen you, and there was no undoing it. Archangel Michael says, when truth bursts forth in tears, it is heaven confirming what has been hidden. No silence, no fear, no barrier can destroy a bond that was written long before time. Tonight, the sobs became the sound of destiny being spoken. Type Amen to get blessing 555. Their body shook with the force of emotions breaking free. They cried out about the pain of longing, about the ache of being away, about the torment of not being able to speak sooner. Their truth became heavier with every sob. The family member's breath grew shallow, realizing they had stepped into a moment larger than themselves. They were no longer simply a listener, they were now a keeper of sacred truth. The tears carried more weight than words ever could. The confession turned into weeping declarations of love, unstoppable and raw. They described you as their light in the darkest hours, the reason they survived when everything else had failed. Their voice was drowning in tears, yet still steady with truth. The sobs became a rhythm, like waves crashing endlessly against the shore. And within those waves was your name, your presence, your eternal bond. The family member could no longer deny what destiny had made clear. Type Amen to get blessing 666. Their tears came in waves, each one heavier than the last, as though their soul itself was pouring out. They clutched their hands tightly, shaking, struggling to contain emotions that refused to be silenced. The family member felt the weight in their own chest, realizing this was no ordinary confession. The words slipped out between sobs, painting the story of a love that never left. They spoke of how even in the darkest nights, your memory was a flame that refused to die. Their voice cracked, but the truth rang louder than the sobs. The family member could not believe how deep the connection ran, how sacred the emotions were. This was not the sound of weakness, it was the sound of destiny unraveling. The tears themselves spoke more than any sentence could. Their body trembled, but they pushed forward, crying about how life felt incomplete without you. They admitted they had tried to move forward, but the bond always pulled them back. Their confession turned the silence into thunder. Type Amen to get blessing 777. Their cries shook the room, as if every corner was echoing the truth. The family member sat frozen, unable to speak, realizing they were standing at the edge of a revelation too powerful to deny. The sobbing felt endless, but so did the love inside each word. They whispered your name, trembling, as if saying it gave them life and broke them at the same time. The tears were unstoppable, carving honesty into every sound. Their voice was raw, carrying years of silence that had finally shattered. The family member covered their mouth, unable to hide the shock. What they heard was not just emotion, it was eternal truth taking form. The bond had been exposed, and it demanded to be seen. Archangel Michael says, the universe bends when divine connections are revealed. No matter how deeply buried, they will rise like fire through silence. And tonight, through tears, heaven made sure it could not be hidden anymore. Type Amen to get blessing 888. The cries became softer for a moment, filled with trembling breaths. They confessed that they had feared speaking before, afraid of rejection, afraid of judgment. But now, their soul could not be chained any longer. The family member leaned forward, their own eyes moist, realizing the truth had always been present. They saw it in the way every word carried weight, in the way every tear carried eternity. They knew this was a love beyond human understanding. The sobbing returned with greater force, as if the silence of years was being broken all at once. They admitted they had prayed for a sign, and now the tears themselves became the answer. Their confession filled the air with sacred power. Your connection was no longer hidden, it had been shouted through sobs, etched into time, and carved into the soul of those who heard. The family member now carried this truth within them, unable to erase or ignore it. Type Amen to get blessing 999. Their cries no longer sounded human, they were the cries of a soul being torn open by truth. Every tear that hit the floor carried the weight of memories that refused to die. The family member felt chills as if the entire atmosphere had shifted. They clutched their chest and spoke of nights when your absence suffocated them. They admitted to seeing your face in their dreams, hearing your voice in echoes no one else could hear. Their sobbing grew violent, shaking their body as they spilled every hidden secret. The listener sat in silence, their hands trembling, realizing they were witnessing more than emotion. This was not just a heart crying, it was destiny revealing itself through unstoppable pain. Each confession sounded like prophecy carved into the night. The tears came faster, harder, drowning out every other sound in the room. They confessed how pretending to move on had nearly destroyed them. And yet, even in the deepest despair, their soul had never let go of you. Type Amen to get blessing 111. The family member gasped quietly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being revealed. They had never imagined the connection was this powerful, this unshakable, this eternal. The truth now hung heavy in the air, undeniable and sacred. Through broken sobs, they described how the universe itself seemed to pull them toward you. They spoke of moments when they felt your presence in places you had never been. Their tears shook the room, but their words shook the soul. The listener could barely breathe, knowing this was not something that could be dismissed. They had just become a keeper of a revelation too great to ignore. The tears made it holy, the confession made it eternal. Archangel Michael says, when hearts chosen by heaven speak, even through sobs, the truth becomes indestructible. Your connection is not ordinary, it is a covenant written before time itself. And tonight, through cries, that covenant has been revealed. Type Amen to get blessing 222. The sobbing softened for a moment, becoming trembling whispers of your name. Each repetition was soaked with longing, devotion, and pain that no words could ever capture. The family member could feel the power behind every syllable. They spoke of how they carried you in silence, holding back emotions that nearly broke them apart. They admitted their heart had been living in two worlds, one of hiding, one of longing. Tonight, those worlds collided, and the truth poured out. The tears fell like endless rain, unstoppable and raw. Their cries echoed with regret, but also with hope. It was as if destiny had forced their lips to finally reveal what was meant to be known. The family member leaned closer, realizing they were not just listening, they were being marked by a sacred truth. Your connection was now shared, etched into memory, and impossible to erase. Type Amen to get blessing 333. Their sobs grew louder, spilling into the silence like thunder rolling through the night. Every cry carried fragments of truth that could no longer remain hidden. The family member pressed their hand against their lips, unable to contain the shock of hearing your name spoken with such force. They confessed that even in crowded rooms, they felt only your absence. Their heart ached with an emptiness that no one else could fill, no matter how hard they tried. The tears painted every word with desperation, leaving no doubt about the depth of the connection. The listener felt their chest tighten as though they, too, had been pulled into the weight of this revelation. The confession was not just emotional, it was spiritual, something that reached beyond flesh and blood. The sobbing itself carried the tone of destiny being revealed. Your name was spoken again, trembling, as if it had lived at the center of their soul all along. They wept as though saying it brought both pain and healing, both torment and freedom. And with every repetition, the bond became stronger in the room. Type Amen to get blessing 444. They admitted to hiding this truth for far too long, burying it beneath fear and silence. But tonight, the tears had broken open the dam, and nothing could stop the flood of honesty. The family member sat stunned, realizing there was no turning back now. They spoke of the signs they had felt, of the undeniable pull that kept drawing them toward you. Their sobbing shook with regret, but it also trembled with hope. The truth was raw, but it was also alive with destiny's fire. The listener could barely hold back their own emotions, sensing the sacredness of this moment. What they were hearing was not just love, it was eternity revealing itself. The weight of it pressed heavily on their spirit. Archangel Michael says, "Tears born from truth are never wasted. They are the language of destiny, speaking what words cannot." And in that room, heaven itself bore witness to the power of your connection. Type Amen to get blessing 555. The sobs softened for a brief moment, replaced by shaking breaths. But even in those pauses, the intensity of the truth lingered in the air. Every heartbeat seemed to echo with the same revelation: you were the one their soul could not let go. They clutched at their face, crying about the moments they almost confessed before. The missed chances, the silences, the times they swallowed their truth, all of it returned tonight in waves of tears. The family members' eyes glistened, unable to look away. Your name fell again from trembling lips, each time more desperate, more sacred. They spoke as though your presence was the only thing keeping them alive in their darkest nights. Their crying carried the sound of a soul finally being set free. The listener realized they were not just hearing a secret, they were standing in the presence of destiny unfolding. Nothing in that moment could be denied, erased, or forgotten. The sobbing had carved your connection into history itself. Type Amen to get blessing 666. The sobbing grew wilder, as if every hidden year of silence had finally broken free. Their body shook violently, and every sentence came out heavy with pain. The family member leaned forward, realizing this was no ordinary moment but destiny tearing through flesh and soul. They confessed how many times they tried to run from this feeling, but life always pushed them back toward you. Every corner of their existence carried your shadow, your voice, your essence. The tears were unstoppable, like rivers that refused to be dammed. The listener gripped their knees, struggling to process the magnitude of what they were hearing. It was too much to contain, too powerful to dismiss. Every sob became proof that this connection was divine. Your name trembled from their lips again, raw, broken, desperate. They spoke as though the entire universe revolved around the bond they carried inside. And the more they cried, the clearer it became: this truth was eternal. Type Amen to get blessing 777. The tears fell into their hands as they wept about the weight of holding this secret for so long. They admitted the silence had nearly destroyed them, suffocating their spirit day by day. Tonight, the release became salvation. The family members shook their head in disbelief, realizing the bond had been deeper than anyone imagined. It was not a passing moment, it was a force carved into time itself. Every tear soaked the truth into the room. Their voice cracked as they begged forgiveness from heaven, from destiny, from themselves. For waiting, for hiding, for not speaking sooner. The sobbing made the apology sound like a prayer. Archangel Michael says, "When love is written in eternity, no silence can erase it." The tears are proof that heaven's will has reached the earth. And tonight, your connection was sealed in uncontrollable cries. Type Amen to get blessing 888. Their chest rose and fell violently, as though they were battling with every breath. They described how even in laughter, they felt hollow, because only thoughts of you brought them true life. Their tears turned each word into an echo of eternal longing. The family members' own hands trembled, their eyes moist with the force of the revelation. They could feel heaven pressing down on the room, making the moment heavy with destiny. The sobbing filled the air with sacred weight. They broke into uncontrollable weeping again, saying that nothing, no distance, no time, no silence, had been able to sever the bond. Their love had survived storms, shadows, and silence, yet still it lived stronger than ever. Their voice was hoarse, but their heart roared through the sobs. The listener sat frozen, unable to move, knowing they had just witnessed truth breaking open. Nothing would ever be the same after this night. The confession had marked history, and it was carved forever into the heart of time. Type Amen to get blessing 999.